West Virginia has a progressive vaccine policy. And I would like to update that physician on what happened in Virginia, because I was actually part of that. In Virginia, there was a bill that was proposed that asked for the religious exemption to be removed. The people spoke out, and 10 out of 10 of our senators rejected that bill outright. That was the result of the vote. The people spoke out, the senators listened, they listened to the evidence, despite the fact that there were people who had obvious conflicts of interest that were testifying and had the large majority of time and were actually skewing the statistics. We proved and showed how they were skewing the statistics, showing that there were more unvaccinated people in Virginia than there actually are. The states of Maine, Maryland, North Carolina, Washington, Colorado, Oklahoma, Texas, Pennsylvania, and Rhode Island have all rejected legislation that would limit their vaccine exemptions. So please don't think that the 3 states that currently have these laws that only permit limited medical exemptions are progressive. They're not. They are the exception. I would like to address whooping cough, pertussis, because that was also brought up last week. And I happen to have studied this extensively, the history of the different vaccines, and I'd like to tell you about what's happening today. Whooping cough is endemic. I am called from people all over the world who tell me that their babies have whooping cough, that they've been to the doctor several times, the doctors couldn't recognize it, denied it, refused to test for it, and then finally when the parents knew it was whooping cough and they insisted on being tested, that those babies turned out to be positive. In the meantime, they were treated with drugs that not only will not be helpful, but that can be harmful. What's happening today, again, in the old days, before we had a different vaccine. Let me start to pre-vaccine. Pre-vaccine, adults developed very strong immunity at the lung interface, and I can get to that in a minute, but there's a peer-reviewed article by Warfel from 2014 that was done on baboons who show the similar type of cough and immunity to humans, which showed basically that if you don't have that strong immunity at the lung interface, that even if you're vaccinated, you're likely to be the person that's spreading disease asymptomatically. But pre-vaccine, these adults experienced the disease and they developed very strong immunity and limited the spread. Then the first vaccine came along. It was a whole cell vaccine, meaning it was the entire bacteria that was killed and put into the vaccine and injected. It had thimerosal in it and aluminum in it. It was very reactogenic. There were major problems that were happening with that. Vaccine companies went out of business. Connaught went out of business with that vaccine. And it was basically replaced by the vaccine that we have today, which is acellular vaccine, which means that there are just some parts of the bacteria in the vaccine. So the good news about that is that it's less reactogenic, meaning that there are far fewer problems with it, but there's still significant problems if you look at VAERS. But that it creates something called original antigenic sin. And I didn't create this term. This is an immunologic term that indicates that your first experience with an infection or with a vaccine will predict your response to later exposures. And that can actually be a detrimental thing or a helpful thing. If your first exposure is an acellular vaccine, this has been proven by Cherry, who is one of the foremost writers on this issue for the past 2 or 3 decades, peer-reviewed medical journals, showing that people that are vaccinated don't respond to a toxin that the bacteria creates called adenylate cyclase toxin. It basically creates a force field that fools the body. So what happens is these people get their vaccines, which might prevent you from coughing for a short period of time. But ask yourself, why do babies need so many vaccines? Why do we have to keep getting them over and over? Why does a pregnant woman require a vaccine every time she's pregnant, even if she's pregnant every year? It's because of this phenomenon that the vaccines, while they might prevent you from coughing for a short period of time, will not actually prevent you from spreading the disease. And moreover, that if you're exposed to the bacteria later, you are the person that's more at risk for having a very serious case of whooping cough if that vaccine is not protecting you the way it is designed to. The evidence for that is with Warfel that I talked about earlier, and also Dr. Cherry has written about this, that the people that are vaccinated, their immunity begins in the blood and not in the lung surface. The bacteria comes in through the lungs. And so you want the battle to take place at the lung surface, and that's what happens with natural immunity. So let me just tell you the difference between these two baboon types. They looked at baboons that had never been vaccinated, and they gave them the disease, whooping cough. Then they took some that were vaccinated with the vaccine that we use today, and they compared them after re-exposure. And what they found is that the baboons who had been vaccinated with the vaccine that we use today had very high colony counts of bacteria in their lungs, even though they weren't coughing when they were re-exposed. The baboons who actually were recovered after whooping cough and then re-exposed had no bacteria in their lungs. So that's one of the problems with today's vaccine. But the other problem is, and this is written about in the CDC's website, it's very widely published, nobody wants to talk about it, but mutant strains have been born out of vaccinated populations. Just like bacteria mutate and become superbugs, the same thing has happened in a big way with pertussis vaccines. It's a major problem. It's written about worldwide. There's pertactin, which is an antigen on the bacteria, is not on some of the bacteria that are now these mutant strains. They're producing more toxin. It's much more vicious. We're seeing definitely worse cases of whooping cough, and these strains, it's documented medical literature, have come out of vaccinated populations, not unvaccinated populations. They don't find them there.
Okay. I'm going to let the chair recognize the senator from Jefferson to wrap up with the questions, and then we'll go from there real quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate it. I know we don't have much time, so I'm just going to ask you about a couple things. I very much appreciate you coming and the excellent information that you have. I would love to get some of this stuff emailed to me, and I will check your YouTube channel too. Thank you. So I have here the states, the 47 states that have religious exemptions. And in your extensive studies that you have done, have you seen that by granting religious exemptions, it has caused any kind of detrimental effect in those states?
Certainly not, and definitely not in the state of Virginia. The fact is that even people who want to be exempt from some vaccines will still be in favor of getting medical treatment. It's actually, there was one case in Philadelphia that rejected that, but that's certainly not the norm.
Okay, thank you very much. And then one more question. So I agreed with you in the presentations that we heard last Tuesday. You know, I do not wish for anyone to get sick or get hurt by vaccines. But in your testimony, you make it sound like some of the vaccines might actually be causing more illness than if we weren't vaccinated. Is that what you're trying to say, at least in some cases?
Well, I have to look at each vaccine separately. I'm not going to, it depends on what you're calling an illness, because vaccines can literally affect any organ of the body. There's a risk and a benefit ratio for every vaccine. Herd immunity is not a given for every vaccine. Some of them, it's not even built into the blueprint of the vaccine itself. So we have to look at each vaccine separately. When it comes to whooping cough, I think when you look at the total picture and see that the mutant strains have evolved in vaccinated populations, that's a vaccine that needs to be critically looked at, and parents and doctors need to be informed about the problems. We can't just keep religiously repeating vaccines are safe, effective, and necessary while people are getting very sick and not getting compensated for the lives that are lost.
So you would be in favor of just a more informed consent of the population?
And I am in favor of people being able to opt out of certain vaccines if it's against their moral and religious preference, and that doctors need to be able to make their own decisions for medical exemptions. Even in your state, that's getting funneled through one young doctor who doesn't have very much experience. It's basically telling every other doctor that's 40, 50 years old that their medical opinion doesn't matter.
Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it.